I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff. Today we're going to make some raised garden beds that will last a really long time. My wife and I have always wanted to have a garden, and since right now we're trying to stay at home and stay away from people, I figured this was a perfect time to try to put one together. Now, a couple of small caveats. One, I know nothing about gardening. Part of the reason we're doing this is so that we can learn how to grow some of our own vegetables. And number two is that there are a million ways to do the type of bed that we're going to do, and that is a raised garden bed. The cool thing about raised gardens is that you can make them any size and put them just about anywhere. We've got this small little area right here outside of our back door, and we're going to put two 4x4 boxes so that we can try planting some different things. Now, like I mentioned before, there's a bunch of different ways you can do these boxes. If you've got some rot-resistant wood near you, maybe cedar or cypress, something like that, you can totally build some boxes out of that wood and it will work perfectly fine. Eventually, those things will break down, but they'll last you quite a few years. Some people will use pressure-treated lumber. I don't want to do that because we're going to try to eat what we grow, and there are chemicals in the pressure-treated lumber that I don't really want mixing with my food. There are a lot of kits that you can buy that are everything you need to build a raised bed garden. You can get those online and at your local big box stores. But unfortunately for us, none of those options really worked in this case. They're things that we couldn't get locally or they're too expensive to order online, and so I started looking at some other options. I found some kits that actually included composite pieces to use for the sidewalls of the deck, and then I realized that I could use composite decking. Now, this isn't the cheapest option by far, but it's not really that much more expensive than wood, and it will last pretty much forever. These are the decking boards I got. Now, they are pretty thick and pretty heavy. If you buy the composite pieces made specifically for garden beds, they're often hollow. But since I could get these locally, I decided to go ahead and get these, and I got them in an 8-foot length, and that way I can cut each one in half, and that will give me 2 pieces, 4 feet, that I can stack on top of each other to make one wall. So basically, I'm going to need 8 walls between the 2 beds, so I got 8 pieces. I'm going to use the circular saw to cut these down, and then we'll figure out where to put them. Now, one quick note on these are actually 8-foot boards, but when you measure them out, they're 97.5 inches long. I don't know why, but the only important thing is that you cut this in half. So I just found the middle of that and made that mark. And as long as all the pieces are the same length, it doesn't really matter what that length is. All right, we've got all of our pieces cut. Now, you could do anything at this point. You could put a 2x4 in the ground, drive in some screws into the end of these pieces, and you're good to go. You're just making a box. This is not a complicated project. But if you know me at all, you know that I like to overcomplicate things a little bit. So I came up with another way to make the corners for this. I've actually got some 2-inch angle iron. It's made out of aluminum, so it's not going to rust. And I'm going to use that to make a corner piece, but also make it into a spike to hold the entire thing down. Let's go to the shop and I'll cut those pieces down. All right, we've got this angled aluminum. I call it angle iron just out of habit, but it's angled aluminum. It is very thin. I would prefer for it to be a little bit thicker, but this is what I could get locally, and it should work out just fine because it's not really doing anything except holding the corners together, and then we're going to spike it into the ground. Now, those pieces of composite board are about 5.5 inches tall, and we're going to do 2 of those for each wall. So we need an 11-inch piece plus a spike at the end. So I'm going to cut about maybe 14 inches down, and then we're going to use one of the woodworking tools in here to cut some little angles on the bottom. Now, if all you have is a circular saw or a jigsaw, that will totally work. You can cut aluminum with just about every woodworking saw. I've got all these stacked up even on one end, and I've got 11 inches marked. And so the rest of this material is going to end up being a spike of some sort. I don't know the exact shape. So I'm going to tape all these together, take them to the bandsaw, and make all of these cuts at the same time. I've got these taped up to cut on the bandsaw, and I think the bandsaw is the perfect tool for this, to be able to cut a straight cut through a bunch of different pieces. But if you're using a different saw, you should definitely cut these one at a time. All right, building the spikes into the corner piece was just kind of an off-the-cuff idea I had. I didn't really think about whether it would work or not, but it actually, I think, is going to work super well. This way we can build the entire box, set it in place on top of the spikes, and then just kind of gently knock in the 4 corners, and these spikes will go down into the ground and keep it in place. Now, if you're not using this type of method, you can always just put a piece of rebar in each one of the corners and maybe along the sides to stop the whole thing from being able to move around. All right, let's go screw these into the boards, and then we can set them in place. I figured before I took it out there, I may as well drill some pilot holes. So I'm going to do 4 holes on each one of these sides, and that's going to go through all the pieces, so it'll do it all at once. And that will give me 2 holes for each board that come in from both the different directions. All right, these things are just about ready to go out now that I've got the holes drilled. I'm going to be putting these together with some decking screws. These are coated, so theoretically the metal in these should not react to the aluminum like it would if you were using a stainless screw. But the bad part about these is that they're a little bit longer than they need to be, but unfortunately I can't really go out to buy the supplies that I need right now, so I'm going to use these. If they stick past the end of the composite board a little bit, I can always grind off the tips, and then maybe down the road when I can get back to the store, I can get some shorter screws and replace each one of these. All right, let's go put this whole thing together. The pieces that are going to go in here could be mitered so that they fit really tightly in the corner, but I don't really want to spend the time to do that. So as long as we put one in this way and then the other one butt joints on top of it, that will work if all the pieces are the same length. The only thing we have to do is make sure that we keep the same orientation and then rotate it on every corner. I'll show you what I mean. Now, one thing I didn't really think about when I was drilling those holes that I just figured out is that I didn't take into account the fact that the pieces were going to be overlapped. That means on one side of the angle, the holes actually need to be further back. They need to be closer to the outer edge. So the holes that I drilled are too close to the corner, need to be further out. Just a note in case you want to try to drill them all ahead of time like I did. Now you can see what I mean by overlapping them in the corners. And as long as you keep them in this orientation and then just rotate from corner to corner, all the outside sides will be the same length. Now, unfortunately, there's no way around it. These things are going to be hard to deal with. They only are connected in the corners. They're going to be big, kind of floppy. They don't have any diagonals in them to give them any structure. So until you actually get them in the place and hammered into the ground, they're going to be hard to handle. The more people you have to help you flip this thing over and put it together, the better. We've got these moved over here, but before we stick them down into place, I'm going to actually lay them down upside down. That makes it easier to move them around, get their placement correct. Then we'll mark where they go, move them out of the way, clean up the ground underneath, then bring them back in, lay them right side up, and hammer in the corners. All right, there you go. Just a little bit of time, extremely easy to put together, and it was really awesome how easily they stuck into the ground with those spikes built onto the frame. So now that we've got these in place, I've got to figure out a way to go get some dirt without interacting with anybody. We'll get these filled up and get some stuff planted. I don't know much about gardening, so we're actually going to start with a book that was recommended to me about square foot gardening. Essentially, you take the garden bed that you're going to work in and you break it into square foot blocks. I'm going to do that with some screws and some string, and then you just have to worry about planting stuff in a particular square foot area, and then you move on to the next square foot area. Hopefully this will make it a little bit less overwhelming for us since we're just getting started with gardening, and if you want to find out more about this book, I'll put it linked down below. You can check it out. So what I'm going to do here is just measure out from the outside and then make a mark every 12 inches Then I'll go back in and put a screw in at all of those marks and then connect those screws with some string. I've got these things built and planted. They're looking good, but now I just have to do my best to keep everything alive. I'm sure I'll be updating everybody on Instagram about how this garden is going, so if you're not following me over there, be sure to go do that at ILikeToMakeStuff. If you're already a gardener and you have some experience with this, I know that you've probably got some fantastic tips. I would love it if you would share those down in the comments for us and for everybody else watching. We've got tons of other types of project videos that you may want to check out, and if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that as well. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. I'll be keeping track of this on my Instagram stories, so go hit the... I found some examples of some composite... But I decided to find... Another thing that I saw... Okay. I would love that. I would really appreciate it. Not only to grow your own... I have no idea what I'm saying. I have not planned ahead at all.